Well, welcome everyone. There are a lot of people here today. I knew that there was a need for this information. I knew people really wanted to get this information, but I had no idea how many people would attend this. So today I will be modeling brave talking for everybody. So I gave this talk a very long title because I wanted people to come who may not have understood what selective mutism was. So the reason I have shy in quotations, you'll start to learn as we go along, because this isn't really what we're talking about today. These are not shy kids, this is something different. So let's get started. Why are we here today? So we're all here today because we know somebody who has a difficult time talking in some situations, despite being able to talk fine in others. So maybe it's your child, maybe it's a student in your classroom, or somebody you work with clinically. So maybe I can just get a sense about who we have here. So how many, just raise your hand, how many school professionals or teachers are in the audience? Great. And how about clinicians, therapists, something of the sort? Great. And parents? Fantastic. So we have a real mix of an audience here, and I've tried to make this presentation applicable and informational to everybody. So most of you have seen firsthand how hard this difficulty is of talking for these children, for the children, as well as for the adults who interact with them. And I'm here today because I strongly believe that selective mutism represents a significant mental health problem, and one that people know very, very little about. And the reason that I think that it is so important is because it's impacting children at a critical point in their development. And they're missing very important opportunities for social interaction, for academics, for all of these milestones that they should be able to be going through with ease. This is getting in the way. And people don't really understand what's happening for these kids. So these are just some statements that parents have said to me over the years that really highlight to me why this is important to address and why we need to be talking about this. So my daughter won't tell anyone, just make sure it goes up there, won't tell anyone at school when she has to go to the bathroom. And so there's been several accidents. So, that's fine when the kids are in preschool. You sort of expect it. Kindergarten, okay, it's a little troublesome. But the time they get to grade 1, if these kids are having accidents, this is a significant problem. It's going to impact them socially, and also the teachers also don't know what to do with these kids in the classroom. He got on the wrong school bus, and then he didn't tell anyone. So this child actually got on the wrong school bus, recognized that he was at the wrong place, but was unable to say to the bus driver, I need to get off, this isn't my bus, and ended up in a totally different place. She won't stand up for herself. Kids will take her toys, and she won't even say, that's mine. And this last one is it really shows how this can be actually a safety concern. She was playing in the pool and she went under and she wouldn't call for help. And so this was a child who had come to me, and the parent said, this is when I said we need to get help for this. She wouldn't even take care of her own safety. So I must start this talk by thanking Dr. Steve Kurtz and the Child Mind Institute. All of the ideas that you'll see today must be credited to them there. They have really been taking the little research that we have and formulating it into a program that's having a huge, huge impact with these children. And so the information that you will see today must be credited to them. And I really encourage everybody to go on the Child Mind Institute webpage and investigate the wealth of knowledge they have there about a whole host of different mental health disorders. So we've got about an hour and a half or so together tonight. So what is our plan? So the first thing I'd like to do is have a little quiz. So there is a lot of myths out there about what we are talking about, and I want to debunk some of these myths. so that we can all be sure that we're on the same page, that we're talking about the same thing. And then once we know what selective mutism is not, then I'd like to give some psychoeducation about what it is. So what are we talking about here? Then I'm going to present a little bit about some of the research that we know now about treatments that work. And the research is still limited, but we're gaining more and more as time goes on. Finally, although I can't provide you all with exactly everything to do for behavior therapy to get all your kids better in an hour and a half, I do want you guys to be able to come away today with some tips and some tools that are practical, that you can go home with your child, with a child in your classroom, and try some of these things, and try to encourage speech in reluctant speakers. Finally, then we'll try about getting more help. So where can you go if you do need more help? And I'll point you to some directions. And then hopefully we'll have some time for some question discussion. And then I'm going home to get a chocolate bar for my brave presenting tonight. So the first. All right, so the first, true or false? Children develop selective mutism because of a big trauma or abuse, or because they have some family secret they're scared of sharing if they start talking. So, anybody think that this is true? Good. This is false. All right? And this was a very commonly held belief. And over time, I think people are beginning to understand that this is not true, but still, there are a lot of people out there who hold this belief strongly. And this is a very, very dangerous belief to have out there, and one that I want to make sure we clear up and that everybody understands is not true. Because, for various reasons. First of all, if parents think that other people are going to think that their child isn't talking because they've suffered some kind of abuse, or they have some family secret or something like that, they're not going to take their child to get help for fear of what that healthcare professional is going to think of them. So that is a very worrisome myth to have out there. It also means, from a clinician point of view, if as a clinician you believe that the reason this child isn't talking is because they have some kind of trauma history, you're going to treat that very, very differently than if you believe that this is something different. And the kind of treatment that therapists will use with children who've experienced trauma is usually a play therapy model, and usually a non-directive play therapy model. And that kind of therapy is actually counterindicated for children with selective mutism. So kids won't get better if they're getting non-directive play therapy. They will love going to therapy. They get a whole hour to spend one-on-one with a supportive adult who doesn't ask them a single question. And they'll love going, but they will not get better. All right. Number 2. Children with selective mutism are shy. They will outgrow it. Just give them a little bit of time. I hear this all of the time from parents who come to see me because they've gone to the pediatrician or their family doctor, and their family doctors will say, in well-meaning ways, just relax. You're just getting way too high-strung about this. They'll outgrow it. They'll be okay. So this is something different than shy. Shy is a common characteristic, a trait, that is not maladaptive. This is not something that interferes with a child's functioning being shy. There are lots of shy people out there. Being shy is not a mental health disorder. Being selectively mute is different because that is interfering with functioning. So this is very, very different. The longer you wait to get treatment, the harder it is to treat. Because these children have years and years and years and years of learning how to not speak in situations and avoiding what they fear most. And so I really encourage this myth to be debunked. And just as an aside about the word shy, I always really encourage parents not to call their kids shy in front of them. So often what will happen is, you know, as adults, you do it for other kids too. You know, you say hi to the child that you see, oh, hi, Johnny, how are you? And Johnny sort of looks at you and you say, oh, that's so cute, you're shy. Right? And I mean, or, oh, she's just shy. And the mom says, come on, Johnny, what do you say? And you, oh, that's okay, they're just shy. So what that child has learned is I'm a shy person and that's who I am. So we want to reframe that and being like, you can be brave and talk. So that's just a little bit of an aside. All right. So that was false. Children with selective mutism are oppositional and manipulative. So we hear this a lot as well because it can actually look like they're being quite oppositional. And so the DSM, which is the sort of language of psychologists and psychiatrists and mental health professionals, where we classify all mental health disorders, previous versions, so the DSM-3, actually called selective mutism elective mutism, so that they were choosing or electing to be mute. And so the idea behind this was willful behavior. And then the thought that comes with this is that there's poor parenting involved, and that the children are being purposely oppositional. And so we know now that this is not true. And again, if you believe and you go from the lens of this is an oppositional problem, your treatment is going to look very different. You're going to start doing limit setting, as opposed to what we do, which is brave talking or building brave muscles or building bravery. Okay, so kids with selective mutism have speech problems. And so this is a common one because I get a lot of people coming to me and being like, well, they sent my child at the school to the speech and language pathologist. I said, well, is there a speech problem? Like, are you having some speech problems at home? No. So why did they send it to the speech and language pathologist? I don't know, they said that's who deals with it. So this can be true. Children with selective mutism can have a speech and language problem, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they do. And it's very hard to test these children. And so sometimes it will come up during testing that there's a speech and language problem, but that's because they haven't been able to perform to the way that you would expect them to because of this inability to talk to new people. And some really interesting recent research has come up where they trained parents on some of the measures that speech and language pathologists give children. And so some of the research that in before had shown this deficit in speech and language areas, and then they get the parents instead to start testing these kids, they actually found that those results were not as bad as they used to be. And then when the parents were doing it without someone new there, these kids were performing better. So yes, there are some children who have significant speech and language difficulties, who have selective mutism, but that's not necessarily what we're dealing with here. Selective mutism is a form of autism or a severe learning disability or mental retardation. So I kind of lump them all together because I've heard them all. So this again is a troublesome myth that's out there. Prognosis and diagnosis is very, very different for selective mutism than it is for something like autism. And this common misconception really comes from when children with selective mutism look anxious, they kind of look like they're not there, right? So they might look like this, and they freeze, and they might be looking somewhere else, make really poor eye contact. So you've brought your child to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician starts asking questions, and the child's like this, or like that, or trying to hide behind. And so, you know, this misdiagnosis can happen. And the same thing with a cognitive deficit. If you're at school and you can't show what you know, then the teacher's going to think you got a problem, a learning problem. And often these kids are quite bright. There's no relationship between any of these things in selective mutism. Now, that's not to mean that a child couldn't have both, but it's not necessarily the same thing. All right, so children with selective mutism are afraid to be in social situations. So this is kind of an interesting one because selective mutism is not the same thing as social phobia. So social anxiety is the fear of doing something embarrassing in a social situation and then an avoidance of these social situations. So there was research out there that exists right now that there's actually, some of the research is showing a 90% overlap between selective mutism and social phobia. However, there's more recent research that's ongoing that seems to say that this might be actually exaggerated. So I've seen many, many children who have selective mutism who I would never call that they were socially phobic. They might be at the front of the first kid in the birthday party, so excited to be at the birthday party, laughing and smiling, playing on the playground, participating in the classroom, eager to make friends, really, really friendly. There's not really any social anxiety there. However, if you ask them a question in front of the whole class, that's when you see the anxiety. So lots of kids with selective mutism have social anxiety, but these, again, are not the same thing. So I have this slide in here because, to be honest, one of my motivations in giving this talk was to try to get clinicians out there to start treating selective mutism. And when I've asked various clinicians if they'd like to see some of these kids, I've heard things like, "That is so hard to treat. I can't do that. It takes so much time. I don't have the time for that kind of treatment. It takes so much patience. I'm not that patient. And it's going to be so quiet. How will I deal with all that quiet in my office?" And I would say that if your office is quiet, then you're doing something wrong. Then you're not treating selective mutism. So this is false. Getting into this area has been the most rewarding part of my practice, I have to say. These kids, to not be able to talk in social situations and to feel that you can't express yourself and to be able to be with your peers and to have that level of anxiety and then have somebody teach you the skills and help you do it, is these children just blossom. They are so proud of themselves. And it is so fun. So for all the clinicians out there, I have so much fun when I go to work. I play games like Zingo and Spot It, and we do scavenger hunts, and we're out there asking random strangers if they have dogs at home. And my job is fun, and there's rewards, and there's treats, and we go and order ice cream. So the work is amazing, and it's rewarding, and it doesn't have to be tedious or boring or quiet or hard. And I really encourage everybody out there who are clinicians to start doing the work. Okay. So now, what is selective mutism? So now we've all understand what it's not. So in May, the DSM-5 was published. And finally, selective mutism found its place. So before, it was classified under disorders first diagnosed in infancy and childhood. So what does that mean? We don't really know what does that mean about what it is. But now it's classified as an anxiety disorder. So now everybody's on the same page. We're not talking about oppositional behavior. We're not talking about something on the spectrum. We're not talking about a trauma. We're talking about anxiety. And so it needs to be treated as such. And so what is it? What is it? Consistent failure to speak in specific social situations despite speaking in other situations. It interferes with educational achievement or social communication. it lasts at least a month. And this month, first month, cannot be the first month of school. So it is normal for when kids go into a new school setting to be a little reluctant to talk in those situations. That's not selective mutism. But if that month goes to 2 months, to 4 months, to 5 years, to 12 years, then you're looking at something different. The failure to speak is not due to a lack of knowledge or comfort with the spoken language, and it cannot be better accounted for by communication disorder or pervasive developmental disorder or a psychotic disorder. So that is what we now all understand is the definition of selective mutism. So now that we have the definition, how do we understand this has come to be? So like everything in mental health, it really makes very little sense to talk about nature versus nurture. Because we all know that kids come into the world with a set of characteristics, and then the world interacts with those, and the world comes to that child. So I think it's now well understood that nurture is tipping the scales here. And so how the environment has interacted with these children has contributed to the development of the disorder. So these children are likely to be more behaviorally inhibited at the start. So what does that mean? Behavioral inhibition is a temperamental characteristic that means slow to warm up to new situations. Many kids are behaviorally inhibited. That is a normal thing to be, but some of those kids will go on to develop an anxiety disorder. So these kids are more likely to have been behaviorally inhibited. Often parents of these kids say, you know what, I was kind of a little bit like that when I was growing up. You know, it was hard for me to talk to new people, or I felt really anxious in social situations. So these parents' genes are being contributed to these kids as well. But then it's really how the environment then reacts that tips the scale. So how does the environment react? So this is the behavioral conceptualization of how selective mutism develops. So first, the child is prompted to talk or engage. So my favorite is always meeting someone on the street. So, you and your child are walking down the street and you see somebody you haven't seen for a while, and that person comes up and says, "Hi, how are you?" And you're chatting with them, and they look at your kid and they say, "Oh, Sarah, how are you?" Okay, there was a prompt to engage or talk. So what does Sarah do? Sarah gets really anxious. Somebody's asked me a question. So Sarah starts feeling in her body anxiety, her stomach is feeling anxious, she's feeling, she starts to go down into herself, she looks down, she starts maybe hiding behind her mom, she gets anxious. And the child avoids answering the question. So there's lots of different ways she could avoid. She could hide behind her mom, she looks down, she knows that she just looks up, she does anything she can to avoid. And she looks sort of like a deer in the headlights. And I'm sure if any of you guys have seen these children before, often they look like they're just paralyzed. Oh my goodness, somebody is talking to me and I expect to answer. And that feels really bad. It feels bad for everybody. Parents, teachers, mental health professionals, we all are caring people. We do not want to see anybody in distress. If it is your child, you are predisposed to not see your child in distress. Your natural reaction is to save your child from any kind of upset. As a teacher, it's the same thing. If you see your kid in the classroom upset, you want to go in and make that better. And also as a helping professional, you don't want to see kids upset. And so the natural tendency is to rescue. So the mom steps in and says, "Oh, she's doing great. She just came from ballet class." So, Yaddle rescues, and what happens? Everybody feels better. The child feels better. The parent feels better. The stranger feels better too because she's like, oh, what did I do? I made this kid look like they're going to cry. I just asked how they were doing. Everybody feels better. And so a pattern of negative reinforcement has happened. Okay, and what this means is that behavior is more likely to be stronger the next time because that bad feeling has been taken away. And so the next time that child is prompted to engage in another situation, the child feels anxious, the child avoids because that child has learned, I avoid, someone's going to help me, and I'm not going to feel so bad. And sure enough, someone goes in and rescues, everybody feels better, and it happens again. And this happens over and over and over and over and over again. And if you think about how many opportunities in a given day for that cycle to happen, that's learning, 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 learning. And so by the time a child is 5, they've had this many learning opportunities, 6, 11, 12. Every time they've gone into a situation, somebody's asked them a question, they feel bad, child's avoid, someone makes it better, it keeps going. And they don't learn how to challenge those feelings. So, how many kids are we talking about? You know, everybody's like, selective mutism, what's that? Well, just to put it in perspective, it's a just under 1% disorder. And that might be underestimating, I'm not sure. You know, you can see different prevalence ratings out there, but I think it's pretty commonly understood it's just under 1%. So just to compare that to other low incidence disorders, OCD, which we hear a lot about, is a low incidence disorder that runs, depending on what you read, 1 to 3%. Autism, another low incidence disorder, it's changed a little bit. It seems to be more diagnosis for lots of reasons, but it's also about a 1% disorder. We hear lots about autism. We hear lots about OCD. We don't really hear about selective mutism. You know, those are just that shy kid at the back of the class who doesn't cause very much problems for anybody. So it's about 2.6 to 1 female to male gender ratio, so there are more females being diagnosed. The age of onset seems to be about 2.7 to 4.1, and this is very difficult to assess because it's not usually picked up until the child's gone into a situation where they might have to talk, so like school. Before, they could be quite sheltered in their little environment where nobody might have noticed because they would have been talking to the people in that small environment. And interestingly, despite the fact that it can be diagnosed at about 3, kids are not getting a treatment until 6 or 8 for either. So what is maintaining the behavior? What is keeping it going? We saw that cycle. And so this is just a little bit more details about what we're talking about here. So like I said before, we're all caring people. This isn't something that we're doing because we want to cause a problem in these kids. This is a well-meaning effort to help the child. And what happens instead is that it actually makes the selective mutism worse because they never have to face their fear. They never have to be in the situation where they see, hey, I feel really bad right now, but if I stay and I do it, I will actually feel better. I don't have to avoid to feel better. I will feel better if I do it. And they don't get that opportunity to learn that. So things like jumping in to answer the child. So like I gave the example. So, you know, little Sarah comes and meets somebody, and how are you doing today? She's doing great. She just got, you know, a new puppy. And Sarah didn't get a chance to answer that question. Mom just jumped in because she knew what would have happened if she had waited. Allowing the child to communicate non-verbally. So in your classroom, if you're a teacher, you have 20 or 30 kids in that class. You can't have the luxury of not having that child communicate with you. Or at home, you need to know what your child needs. So, you know, your child's like, you're like, okay, that one, I guess. Which is another example of mind reading. So you're assuming you know what the child wants without the child telling you. oh, she's pointing over there, she must have meant the blue one, maybe. Another thing that maintains is telling others not to engage the child verbally. And I see this all the time. You know, you're walking on the street, you come into an adult, you know, oh, Sarah, how are you doing? And the parent says, oh, she's doing fine. You know, she doesn't really like to talk to new people. The best at this and maintaining this is the kids in the classroom. I go into the classroom, and again, this is well-meaning. These kids are well-meaning. This is their best friend. So I go into the classroom, and I'm there to help this child speak, and I get the teacher to ask the question, and the child next to her goes, oh, Sarah doesn't talk. I do the talking for Sarah. I said, well, actually, Sarah does know how to talk. Sarah's working on her brain talking right now, so I want to hear what Sarah has to say. So kids are great for this. They will help these children through the whole way. But it maintains the problem. Not asking any child any questions that require a verbal response. That maintains it too. So you just stop asking the questions altogether. You know you're not going to get the answers. Let's just not ask them. So this is Rose. And Rose came to see me after she was always selectively mute, but she came to me after an incident where there was a real spotlight effect where somebody had asked her a question with a lot of people around and she got super, super anxious and she actually stopped talking to everybody. So she wasn't even talking to her parents anymore. And she hadn't been talking to her parents for several months. She was only communicating non-verbally. And so she came to see me, and this is a video that was taken, and I have permission to use this, shortly after, or actually right before we started treatment.
Yogurt? No, you have cereal for breakfast, Hannah. How about some...
So you can see the mind reading going on.
Some corn. How about the grilled cheese sandwich? The grilled cheese sandwich. The grilled cheese sandwich? That's good. Why are you crying? Haley, what would you like, Haley?
That's her little sister, who you could hear talking in a second.
What do you mean you're not hungry? Why are you crying? Can you tell me
Nonverbal communication.
You have to eat breakfast. You need something nutritious. Do you want to choose your slices?
So you can see how skilled she's become at nonverbal communication. She's getting all of her needs met. Well, except that she didn't get the cereal she wanted.
Okay. I thought you said you didn't.
But all of this is done non-verbally.
Now you do?
Yeah.
So you can see she's showing her mother something. She's pointing to things. Now, if she was required to talk, if in that situation, you would have seen a lot more anxiety. But because there was no requirement to talk there, we're going to come back to Rose at the end of the presentation. So what do we know works? We don't know very much yet. We don't have a lot of research. But what we do know from a series of single case studies is that treatment works better than no treatment. So what does that mean? Kids are unlikely to just get better on their own. They're more likely to get better if something is done. What's that something? So we seem to sort of have solid support for the behaviorally oriented treatment approaches. So, looking at all the case studies out there, which are the ones that are having an impact and working, we see ones that are behavioral in nature, and I'll say a little bit about what that means in a second. Those are the ones that seem to be working. So finally, this year, we had 2 randomized control trials conducted. So what does that mean? It means we don't know if a treatment works unless we compare it to something else. because other things could have come into play. Maybe the child just got better because time, or maybe it was just hanging out with a nice person made them better. So there's lots of other reasons they could have gotten better. But finally, we have a study where kids are either assigned to behavior therapy or cognitive behavior therapy, or they're assigned to a wait list. And so these two studies were done, one in California at UCLA and one in Norway, and they both found the same thing, that behavior therapy works for treating kids with selective mutism. Unfortunately, these studies had very small sample sizes, so there's still considerable research that needs to be done. The other thing that we do know works is pharmacological treatments, so selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are an anxiety, is used to treat anxiety in kids. So I'm going to just spend a little bit of time talking about what behavior therapy is. I can't go into all the details of it, but I did want to provide a little information so that if you are taking your child to somebody, you know what you're looking for. You want to know what it is that you're getting, and then make sure you're getting something that we already see works. So it's systematic and systemic. So it's doing things with multiple people in multiple systems in multiple settings. So therapy is happening in the office, but very little. In the community, in the home, in the school. All of these different places are being addressed, and they're being addressed slowly, one step at a time. And across settings, dance class, soccer. So you're making small goals, and then reframing them into even smaller goals if necessary, and you're working your way up this ladder. What are you doing? You're doing exposure. You're exposing them to the thing that they're afraid of. But you're not throwing them into the deep end and saying, okay, here you go. Start talking and do show and tell in front of the whole class. You're doing it slowly so that they're able to cope with the anxiety, see the anxiety go down, and be ready to go for the next step. So it's practice. And you're starting with easier situations, it's like climbing a ladder. And once you've climbed one rung on the ladder, you don't want to go back. You want to keep on moving forward. And as you go, you reward the child, because you're asking them to do the thing that's absolutely the hardest thing for them. So you figure out what's rewarding for your child, and this can really vary. Some kids just respond well to praise, some kids point systems where they can cash it in, stickers, candy. I use a lot of candy in therapy. I say to parents when they first come to me, I'm sorry if you don't like this, you just need to know that your kid is getting a lot of candy when they come here. Why? Because candy is rewarding for kids, and they're going to be able to perform better if they get something that they really want, or small prizes or something like that. So you're changing the association. So now you're talking is associated with positive outcomes. So first, some candy, and then no anxiety. And so this association is being changed, so they're able to conquer their fear. Now this needs to be for goals that they can reach. So we're shaping behavior, small steps at a time. So I always use the example with the kids, or with the parents. You couldn't give me $1 million to get me to go on the roller coaster at the P&E. It's just never going to happen. That's way outside my anxiety level. So no reward is big enough to get me to do that. So you can't just say to your child, I'm going to give you a trip to Disneyland if you start talking to every single person tomorrow. That's not going to happen. So it needs to be for goals that they can reach. We want them to feel successful. Rewards can always be faded out. So rewards don't have to keep going. And the new reward takes over. And what is that new reward? That new reward is social communication. Being able to communicate with your friends, being able to communicate with your teacher, and feeling that sense of pride when you do it, that's the reward. Being able to go to the play date and be interactive in not just a nonverbal way. These kids, they don't need the candy. very much after that, once they have that kind of real life reward. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to provide some concrete tips that you can take home today. So first, you want to create an environment that's conducive to speech. What does that mean? You want to avoid contamination. So we joke around and we say, I talk to all the parents about contamination, and they're contaminated, or this one, school's contaminated. And that means this is a place that I don't talk. That's what the kid sees in their head. So I don't talk in school, it's contaminated. I talk at home, that's fine. I talk to this person, but not to this person. I talk to this person as long as that person's there. But as soon as that person's not there, I don't talk to that person anymore. These rules are very rigid. When you meet a new child, you want to avoid getting contaminated yourself. And how do you do that? You don't develop that cycle I showed before of non-responding. You don't allow that child to put you in that package of contaminated because I don't talk to that person. I can avoid talking with that one. So how do you do that? You don't ask any questions at the beginning. Give them a chance to warm up. So when a child comes to see me, I spend the first 20 minutes or half an hour without a single question, because I'm developing a relationship that is not based on her not responding to me. So we're playing, I'm commenting on how great her clothes are and how cool that shirt is, and I'm just giving descriptions of what I see. We call this play-by-play announcer. So you can imagine at the hockey game, this one shoots to this one and this one shoots to that one, and the commentator is just giving a play-by-play of what's happening. And that's what you want to do to warm that child up in that situation. So we call these descriptions. So if they're drawing a picture, I'm sitting there with the child, I'm drawing the picture. So, wow, you've picked up the yellow. I see that you're drawing a yellow circle. So I'm just giving descriptions of what I see. And what that actually does is it pulls for some verbals. Because then that child says, yeah, it's the sun. Maybe. Maybe they don't. But maybe they have a chance to. When I was preparing for this, I remembered about a stat that I had read about how many questions kids are asked in a day, so selective mutism aside. And 75% of what parents and adults say to kids is in question form. And so it's this rapid fire of questions. And you can imagine if you were interacting in your day and you just were having question after question spilled out to you, what would you do? You would start, if you didn't not talk at all, you would answer really quickly, or just really shortly. And I just listened to myself in carpool the other day, and the kids all piled into the car, and I was just trying to be conscious of it. And this was me in the car. How was your day? How was your day? What about you? What did you do? Oh yeah, did you get your lunch? I mean, it was just constant. Did you eat your lunch? Who did you play with? Did you have fun today? What did you learn? I mean, I didn't give anyone a chance to answer questions. I just asked them. So asking questions is really not conducive to getting a lot of speaking from kids. And then finally, you don't want a negative talk. And so, again, this is one of those sort of well-meaning things. Parents are always, well, I don't talk badly about my kids. I don't negative talk to them. But there's subtle ways that we do. Why aren't you talking right now? You did just fine yesterday. You were able to do it. Right? So that's negative talking. And all that does is to serve to increase anxiety and make that child less likely to communicate at that given time. All right, so I kind of highlighted the questions a little bit already, but a little bit more on this. So the type of question you ask a child is going to increase the likelihood of a verbal response. So after you've given this warm-up period, you haven't bombarded them with questions yet, you've decreased their anxiety a little bit, eventually you're going to want to ask some questions. So forced choice questions are the most likely to produce a verbal response. Did you go to the beach or somewhere else this weekend? Which color do you like better? The red or the blue? That is a less anxiety-provoking question. The options are right there. I always throw in a something different. So which sticker would you like? The cat, the dog, or something different? So they have an out. Okay, something different. All right. So did you want the fish or the... So you sort of see where I'm going with this. So forced choice questions are the most likely. Once a child is ready, you can start asking open-ended questions. So these are harder, but they encourage more spontaneous speech. So you're not going to just get that one answer. And when a child is ready, you want to start asking these open-ended questions. So what is your favorite color? What did you do this weekend? The kind of questions that you don't want to ask is yes-no questions. And interestingly, these are the questions we are most likely to ask. But yes-no questions do not encourage verbal responding. They encourage nonverbals. So, do you like blue? Okay, they're able to communicate really well by shaking their head. So it's not encouraging a verbal response. Okay, so the next concrete tip. Give these kids some time to respond. So kids with anxiety, it's going to take them longer. When you're highly anxious, your processing speed slows down. So these kids need more time because they're feeling anxious. In addition, these kids have learned if I wait long enough, someone's going to answer for me. Right? So they know the expectation will be lifted of the verbal response. So what I tell parents and teachers is to wait 5 seconds. And I actually say 10 seconds, but let's just say it's 5 seconds, okay? So 5 seconds is a long time, and I'm just going to give you a feel for what that is. So do you like blue or red? That was 5 seconds. That was a lot of silence. And I like to talk, so normally I would have been like, I could have said like 5 other things in those 5 seconds. But instead, I sit and I wait. And I show the child, I'm expecting you to give me a response now. So the child is more likely to give one. So then I get this question all the time. Well, I waited, there was still no response. What do you do then? So you can rephrase the question. So if the question was an open-ended question, try it as forced choice. So what color do you like? You wait your 5 seconds. Okay, the child's. Blue or red? You wait your 5 seconds. Hopefully you've gotten a response. Okay, maybe you don't. And with these kids, you often don't. So then you can repeat it a few times. And then what I'll do when I'm in a classroom is I'll say, you know what, you practice. You can get them to practice with someone they know and that they do talk to if there is someone in the class that they do. There not always is. And you go on to the next kid, but you come back. So that's a strategy that can work. All right, so the next one. Praise. Every time the child speaks, provide labeled praise. So what is labeled praise versus unlabeled praise? Well, unlabeled praise is great job. So the child is not quite sure what the great job was for. So instead what we want to do is to actually label what it is that we like. So what are you praising? Verbal responding. So you can say something like, that was great, brave talking. I love the way you shared that with me. Good job telling the class. I like it when you tell me what you want, because then I can go and get it for you. So that's the actual verbal responding. So great, brave talking is what I will praise in the office. But most kids don't want me to be like screaming out, great, brave talking when I'm in the classroom with them. So I'll say something like, that was great telling. So you can change your language, but you want to be specific on what you like. Or just praise the content. What a fantastic idea. That was a great job remembering all those numbers. Good job explaining the game to everybody. And so that child has a chance to feel pride about, wow, I said something verbally and look, people acknowledged it. This is my favorite. So the kids, I joke with the kids, I call myself new Dr. Annie because I won't allow for any nonverbals. So any kind of nonverbal, you need to prompt for a verbal response. So nodding heads, shaking heads, pointing to things, gesturing. I prompt for a verbal response. And how do I do that? I acknowledge that the child is trying to communicate with me. I see that you're pointing. Is that the green one or the red one? You're shaking your head. Is that a yes or a no? It gets to the point with many of these kids, I'll say, you're shaking your head. I get a verbal response right away. You're pointing. They're quick to give me the verbal response. Because they know I'm not going to accept the nonverbals anymore. Okay, so I hope that I've provided some strategies for everybody that they can take home and try. It's really hard to, pack it all in and try to give a lot of stuff, but I'm hoping that some of these things you'll find helpful. But chances are you'll need some more help. And this is the part that I was kind of scared of, because where do you go for help? I'm not really sure. So where could you go for help? Your local child and youth mental health team. So anxiety disorders were made a top priority by the province in the mental health plan. And so all the teams, everyone in the teams have been trained in cognitive behavioral therapy strategies. So these can be applied to what we're talking about today. They have the knowledge. They might not have the experience dealing with this specific population, but that might not necessarily matter. The goals are, so this is just a little bit about the mental health team. So they're all mandated to provide CBT for anxiety disorders. So that's a really important part. So they're actually being told by the province that they have to give CBT for anxiety disorders. And the reason they're being told that is because science has shown that that's what works. So if you go to that's one place you can go, to your local team. So the other option is private psychologists. So you can go to the BC Psychological Association webpage, and you can look for somebody who specializes, they have a bunch of drop-down menus, somebody who specializes in working with children, and then you want to look for somebody who specializes in anxiety disorders, and then you want to look for somebody who specializes in CBT. And I've got the C in the small c, the big BT, because it's mainly behavior therapy with a little bit of cognitive work. Because the cognitive piece is, I can be brave, I can do this. So getting kids to rethink about how they're doing stuff. And the problem with private psychologists, though, is that access is limited. Services are not covered by MSP, and they're quite costly. However, some coverage is provided by your extended health plan, and I really encourage you to check out your extended health plan. You might not think you have coverage, but you actually might, and you might have more coverage than you think because you have some, your wife has some, your child has some. And this treatment is addressing parenting and kids, and so what you have coverage could go farther than you think. So I really encourage, when you go to get help for your kids, to be a savvy consumer. It's like you're going to buy a car. You wouldn't go buy a car without doing your research first. You wouldn't buy a car that you heard didn't work. And if you got a car that didn't work, you'd take it back. So if what you're doing isn't working, stop doing it and try something different. So here are some red flags. Therapy should not happen just in the office. If you're taking your child to somewhere and it's only happening in the office, now it's going to happen in the office a couple of times, but if it's only happening in the office, and I'll even go, and if they're not even talking to the therapist and it's only happening in the office, you're not getting the right therapy. You should be involved as a parent. This isn't dry cleaning. You're not dropping your child off at the dry cleaner and coming back after an hour and picking them up. You're getting the wrong therapy if you're doing that. You need to be involved. Now, sometimes you might not be in there all the time, and that is because you might be a safety signal for your child. I can talk if mommy's there. So part of the therapy might really be important to pull mommy away, but then mommy needs to come back because mommy needs to know what are the goals for the week, because you need to be practicing every single day with your child. This isn't once a week therapy where you drop off your kid once a week and think your kid's going to get better for that 1 hour, because life happens everywhere else. So every single day you need to be working with your child, and I try to say to parents, half an hour, go out there and do brave talking. So there needs to be daily practice assigned. If your child is not talking to your therapist in 6 to 8 sessions, something's not working. So if you think you're getting good therapy after hearing what I've been talking about represents good therapy, then your child might need to see a psychiatrist to talk about the pros and cons of medication. Sometimes medication can be just a little bit of medication can be what this child needs to get going. And then you discuss again with the medical doctor when that goes away. And that can sometimes be enough. If you think maybe you're not getting good therapy, then you need to go to a different therapist. So, if your child isn't talking to the therapist, you're spending good money, and if you're not spending money, you're getting a child need mental health, you're spending your time, which is valuable as well, and you need to make sure that you're getting what you're paying for. So, that's my pitch on being a savvy consumer. So, this is Rose, and Rose just got the lead in the school play. And it's a little hard to hear what she's saying, but I think that's because of the audio, but you'll still get the idea.
Manual start. Before his very first child, and all around him staring were the creatures who depended upon the great peacock tree. What wondrous and rare animals they were. The man looked about and saw the sun streaming near the canopy. Spots of bright light glowed like jewels in the center of green forest.
So the Child Mind Institute runs a summer intensive. And this is how I got really involved in this treatment, was by going and being a therapist in this summer intensive. And the summer that I went, ABC Nightline came and taped it and did a piece on selective mutism and its treatment. And so this is the piece from ABC Nightline. So do you think, yeah? Okay.
Shyness is hardly uncommon. Just about every kid experiences a paralyzing moment during show and tell, or meeting someone new. But imagine a child so stricken with fear, she goes without speaking for an entire school year. You're about to meet 2 such children, their parents desperate for help, and one man who says he can cure them with a technique that just might work for anyone with a severe phobia. Here's ABC's Juju Chang.
Jake Semmel has trapped himself inside a world of silence.
So what's your favorite TV show?
He speaks to 7 adults in his life.
That's it. Just 7 adults. With everyone else, he won't talk. His parents were baffled.
He hurt himself at camp this summer and he didn't tell anybody. I said, "Did you cry?" He's like, "No." I said, "Did you tell the counselors?" He's like, "No."
Maya Walker is the same way. Watch, she doesn't move a muscle during her school's pageant. Maya's extreme social phobia made it impossible for her to blow out her own birthday candles.
Happy birthday, Maya!
Not talking to your peers, not talking to your teachers, just being, even for recess, being next to the teacher like this.
She never played during recess?
No.
Her mom and stepdad say Maya didn't speak a word for the entire school year. They made this video just so the kids in her class could hear her voice.
Do you talk a lot at home? Yeah, I talk a lot at home too.
Wave goodbye to your class, Maya.
Bye-bye, class. I have to Merry Christmas.
Maya is an extreme example, but nearly all kids have fears of one kind or another. Doctors think that's because parents rescue their kids too soon from what they're afraid of, which only makes the fear grow. Dr. Stephen Kurtz of the Child Mind Institute believes he has an answer. Jake and Maya suffer from selective mutism. He says not only can he cure it, he can do it in just 1 week. His therapy is called Brave Buddies, which exposes them to the very thing they're afraid of, speaking in public.
What's the key to the week here?
Repeated exposure to the same situations that they've been avoiding, like the plague, but providing kind of training wheels until they can do it confidently on their own.
The grown-ups are taught to stop overprotecting them and simply wait 5 seconds before jumping in.
Maya, what job would you like today?
So on day 1, rule number 1, Maya is allowed to feel the painfully long silence, long enough for her to answer.
You're not sure, by the time you're not sure.
Questions are designed to force verbal answers. They're offered a choice instead of nodding.
Jake, what job would you like? Caboose or craft helper? Or something else? Caboose. Ooh, great choice.
Jake's every mumble is praised. Soon, they're set out into the real world to interact with strangers.
Hi.
You're about to watch 6-year-old Jake face his biggest fear.
What's up, buddy?
Where's the zoo?
Where's the zoo?
Our microphones can't even pick it up, but for Jake, it's a small miracle.
Let me just get 3 stickers for how nice you.
The kids wrap up day 1 by cashing in stickers they earned at a prize store. But first, the kids need to engage another stranger, me.
Welcome to the Brave Buddies prize store.
Jake is up first.
Are you a guy who likes bubbles or something different?
Again, barely audible, but his whisper might as well be a roar.
Do you like painting projects or something different?
Now it's Maya's turn. Despite her bravery, she suffers a setback when the anxiety overwhelms her and she has an accident.
Yep, I think she needs to go to the bathroom. That's fine.
It's called Brave Buddies for a reason. After a quick change, she somehow musters the courage to try again.
Do you want jewelry or something different? Something different. Okay, let's keep looking.
The next day, Jake's still struggling with talking, and eye contact is still difficult. But then he shocks everyone with a full sentence.
No.
And for the girl who's never blown out birthday candles before, this is a celebration 7 years in the making. We show Maya's parents video of a daughter they barely recognize.
You can sit down here now.
I'm so proud of her. It takes a lot of courage to, if you would have seen where she was 2 years ago, definitely not the same child.
For Jake and Maya, the boot camp is over, but can they keep it going into the school year? The old, silent Jake still comes out at times.
Are you making this an easy pattern or a hard pattern?
But the new Jake perseveres.
Easy or hard pattern, Jake? Hard.
Maya still has trouble joining the crowd at recess. But in class, her voice is finally being heard. Facing up to their fears allows them to unlock their voices and rescues their childhood. For Nightline, I'm Juju Chang in New York.
So my favorite part of the whole week was that little boy Jake, and you saw the little boy next to him, and we were taking the bus to one of our exposure field trips, and the two of them, and they had just met, were talking so loudly, showing each other what the color of their mouth was after chewing some gum, and they were laughing and, look at mine, no, look at mine, and that boy Jake had never spoken to a peer before, and this was like day 2. So, you know, this kind of approach really works, and it opens these kids' lives up to so much wonderful things. So, so thank you for coming today and listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.